Chosen one, listen closely. What you're witnessing right now is not random, and it's not delayed. The same people who tried to weaken you, silence you, or break your spirit are now facing the consequences of what they sent out, quietly, intensely, and faster than they expected. You didn't have to fight back. You didn't have to explain yourself. You simply kept moving forward while the universe kept record. What's happening now is karma doing its work, without noise, without warning. Doors are closing for them as new paths open for you. The pressure they tried to place on you has shifted back where it belongs. This isn't revenge. This is balance being restored. And if you're hearing this today, it's because you're meant to understand one thing clearly. You were protected the entire time. Before we go any further, like this video, comment, "I stayed strong," and subscribe, because what's unfolding next is only the beginning. They underestimated your silence. When they tried to hurt you, they were waiting for a reaction. They thought you would get angry, argue back, or try to prove yourself. In their mind, noise meant power. Drama meant control. But what completely confused them was your silence. You didn't shout. You didn't fight. You didn't chase explanations. You simply stepped back. And to them, that looked like weakness. What they didn't realize was that your silence was actually a decision. A calm, clear choice to protect your energy instead of wasting it. Walking away is not easy. Staying quiet when you're misunderstood takes strength. There were moments when you wanted to speak, to defend yourself, to clear the air. But something inside you knew that arguing would only pull you into a mess that wasn't worth your peace. So instead of reacting emotionally, you chose distance, you chose focus, you chose yourself. That choice changed everything, even if it didn't look powerful at the time. While they believed they were winning, you were quietly exiting the battlefield. You stopped playing a game designed to drain you. You stopped explaining yourself to people who had already decided how they wanted to see you. And the moment you did that, control shifted. Silence removed their access to you. They had nothing to respond to, nothing to twist, nothing to feed on. That's when their confidence started fading. Silence also gave you clarity. When you're not constantly reacting, you start seeing situations more clearly. You notice patterns. You understand intentions. You realize who respects you and who only wants attention. That awareness doesn't come from arguing. It comes from stepping back. Your quietness gave you perspective they never had. The most powerful part of silence is that it allows truth to rise naturally. You didn't have to expose anyone. You didn't have to point fingers. Over time, people began noticing things on their own. Inconsistencies showed up. Behavior repeated itself. What you stayed quiet about, life spoke loudly for you. And that's when karma began doing its work. Karma works best when you don't interfere, when you don't try to control outcomes, when you don't force justice. Balance finds its own way. Your calm became a mirror. It reflected who you truly were and who they were trying to hide. And the more peaceful you became, the more unsettled they felt. Your silence wasn't about giving up. It was about rising above. It was about choosing long-term peace over short-term satisfaction. You didn't lose your voice. You saved it for places where it would matter. And that's why today, you're stronger, clearer, and more grounded. They underestimated your silence, but that silence quietly became your power. Their actions created their own trap. When they chose to lie, manipulate, or show disrespect, they thought they were being smart. They believed they were in control. At that moment, it didn't look like their actions had any consequences. In fact, it probably felt the opposite. Things seemed to work in their favor. They felt confident, powerful, and untouchable. But what they didn't understand is that every action plants a seed, even when the ground looks quiet. Karma doesn't react instantly like people do. It doesn't shout or warn. It builds slowly, silently, and patiently. While they were busy moving forward without care, the energy they were putting out was shaping their future. Every lie added weight. Every manipulation created imbalance. Every time they disrespected someone, they weakened their own foundation. They didn't see it happening because karma doesn't announce itself. It prepares. Over time, small cracks began to form. Conversations turned tense. Simple situations became complicated. People around them started feeling uneasy, even if they couldn't explain why. Trust, once broken, doesn't collapse all at once. It erodes. Slowly, relationships lost depth. Support faded. The same people who once stood beside them became distant or unreliable, not because of gossip or revenge, but because energy always speaks louder than words. What's important to understand is that none of this happened because you wanted it to. You didn't wish for their downfall. You didn't plan anything. You simply stepped away. And that's why the consequences were so clear and unavoidable. When you don't interfere, karma has a clear path to work. The trap wasn't set by you. It was built by their own behavior. They began facing repeated obstacles. Plans didn't move smoothly. Opportunities slipped away at the last moment. Arguments followed them into places that were once peaceful. Even when things looked fine on the surface, there was constant tension underneath. That's how karma operates. It doesn't always destroy. Sometimes it exhausts. It drains stability, confidence, and peace until the weight becomes impossible to ignore. Meanwhile, you weren't part of that cycle anymore. You weren't feeding the drama. You weren't reacting or responding. That separation made the contrast obvious. You grew calmer while they grew restless. You found clarity while they faced confusion. Their actions created a loop they couldn't escape, and every attempt to fix it using the same habits only tightened the trap further. Karma didn't punish, it balanced. It simply returned what was sent out. The energy they used became the environment they had to live in. And through it all, you learned a powerful lesson. When you stay clean in your actions, you never get caught in someone else's trap. You kept growing while they stayed stuck. While they were busy keeping an eye on you, you were quietly working on yourself. They watched, judged, and sometimes even hoped you would fail. Some of them tried to pull you down with words, doubts, or negativity. But what they didn't notice was what was happening inside you. You weren't standing still. You were changing in ways that couldn't be seen from the outside. Your growth didn't come with loud announcements or sudden victories. It happened slowly, in everyday moments. You learned how to stay calm when things didn't go your way. You healed parts of yourself that once reacted emotionally. You started understanding situations instead of fighting them. Little by little, your mindset shifted. You became sharper in your thinking, more balanced in your emotions, and wiser in your choices. That kind of growth is quiet, but it's real. There came a point when you realized something important. You no longer thought the way they did. The things that once upset you didn't have the same power anymore. The opinions that once mattered started feeling irrelevant. You stopped measuring yourself through their eyes. Instead, you began trusting your own understanding. That realization was the turning point. It didn't feel dramatic, but it felt freeing. While you were moving forward internally, They stayed stuck in the same patterns. They repeated the same behaviors, the same reactions, the same ways of thinking. Nothing really changed for them because they never looked inward. Growth requires honesty with yourself, and not everyone is willing to do that work. So while time passed, they remained in the same place mentally and emotionally. As your path began to shift, distance naturally formed. You didn't need to create it. It happened on its own. Conversations felt different. Priorities no longer matched. What once connected you now felt heavy or outdated. That's when karma often steps in. Not as punishment, but as separation. Life starts moving people in different directions based on who they are becoming. You moving forward didn't cause their struggle. Their refusal to grow did. Karma shows up when paths divide. One continues evolving, the other resists change, and the gap between those paths becomes impossible to ignore. You started finding peace in progress, while they felt frustration from staying the same. This growth wasn't about proving anything to anyone. It was about becoming someone you could respect. You didn't rise by stepping on others. You rose by outgrowing what once held you back. And in that quiet growth, you found something more valuable than validation: clarity. That's when you truly understood. You weren't ahead of them by chance. You moved forward because you chose to. The truth began exposing itself. You didn't need to fight for the truth. You didn't need to explain yourself again and again. At one point, you understood that defending yourself would only drain you. So you stepped back and let life handle it. That choice felt uncomfortable at first, because staying silent when you're misunderstood is never easy. But over time, something powerful happened. The truth began to speak on its own. People started noticing small things. Stories didn't line up the way they used to. Words and actions stopped matching. What once sounded convincing began to feel off. These weren't sudden discoveries. They were slow realizations. A raised eyebrow here, a quiet doubt there. The image they worked so hard to maintain started cracking, not because of exposure, but because reality doesn't stay hidden forever. You didn't push anyone to see your side. You didn't correct every lie. You didn't try to change opinions. And that's what made the difference. When truth is forced, people resist it. But when it appears naturally, people accept it. The same people who once believed everything they heard began asking questions on their own. And once questioning starts, the illusion loses its power. Karma doesn't attack, it reveals. It doesn't come with loud confrontations or public drama. It works quietly, placing people face to face with the consequences of their own behavior. When someone builds on dishonesty, the structure eventually weakens, and when it weakens, everything built on top of it becomes unstable. That's exactly what happened. You stayed clean through all of it. You didn't lower yourself to their level. You didn't change who you were to survive the situation. That integrity became your protection. While they had to keep track of stories, explanations, and excuses, you only had to be yourself. That simplicity kept you grounded and steady. As the truth unfolded, they were left facing what they had created. Not in front of a crowd, but within their own circle. Trust faded. Credibility slipped. People listened differently. The same words that once convinced others now felt empty. And that realization is heavy, because it can't be blamed on anyone else. What makes this moment powerful is that you didn't have to prove anything. Life did it for you. The truth didn't rush, but it arrived exactly when it was supposed to. And when it did, it carried weight. More weight than arguments. More weight than explanations, because truth that reveals itself can't be denied. What they sent out came back multiplied. What people put out into the world doesn't vanish. It moves, waits, and eventually finds its way back. That's how energy works. When they caused you stress, confusion, or emotional pressure, they thought it ended with you. They didn't realize that energy always circles back to its source. It doesn't return in the same form. It comes back in ways that fit their life. The stress they placed on you slowly turned into pressure in their own world. Simple situations started feeling heavy. Small problems felt overwhelming. Things that once felt easy became difficult to manage. It wasn't sudden or dramatic, but constant. A weight they couldn't explain followed them around, making even good moments feel tense. The fear they tried to put inside you showed up as anxiety they couldn't escape. You learned how to steady yourself, how to breathe through uncertainty, how to stay grounded. They didn't. Instead, that same energy followed them into their thoughts. Restlessness replaced confidence. Worry replaced clarity. Even when nothing was wrong on the outside, unease lived inside them. The instability they created became their environment. Plans kept changing. Relationships felt uncertain. Trust didn't stay solid. Things never fully settled. When someone creates chaos, they eventually have to live in it. Karma doesn't punish, it balances. It aligns people with the energy they used until the lesson is understood. What's important is that karma doesn't return things equally. It multiplies them. A small act of harm doesn't come back small. It spreads across different areas of life, not to destroy, but to teach. While they were dealing with that internal loss of control, you were doing the opposite. You were rebuilding your peace, step by step. You learned how to choose calm over reaction. You learned where your limits were. You stopped carrying what wasn't yours. Your peace didn't come from winning. It came from letting go. And as your inner world became steadier, theirs became more unstable. That contrast wasn't accidental. It was the result of different choices. You didn't celebrate their struggle. You didn't watch with satisfaction. You simply moved forward. And that's why the balance felt so clear. While they were trying to manage the consequences of what they sent out, you were focused on protecting what you had built inside. It was about alignment. You aligned with peace, clarity, and growth. They stayed connected to stress, fear, and control. And life reflected those choices back to each of you. Energy always returns. The only question is what you choose to send out in the first place. You were protected the whole time. When you look back now, things make more sense than they did at the time. Situations that once confused you begin to feel clear. Doors that suddenly closed no longer look like bad luck. You can see that many of those paths would have led to pain, stress, or loss of yourself. At the moment, those endings hurt. They felt unfair. But today, you understand that those closures were protection in disguise. Some connections ended before they could harm you deeply. People drifted away just when their influence might have pulled you into something unhealthy. At the time, it felt like rejection or abandonment. You questioned yourself. You wondered what you did wrong. But now you can see that not every loss is a punishment. Some losses are quiet rescues. There were moments when everything seemed to fall apart at once. Plans didn't work out. Support disappeared. Stability felt shaky. But what you didn't realize then was that something bigger was redirecting you. You were being moved away from environments that would have drained you, changed you, or broken your spirit over time. Protection doesn't always feel gentle. Sometimes it feels like disruption. Karma wasn't only correcting others, it was shielding you. While situations unfolded around you, unseen boundaries were being placed. You were stopped from making choices that would have cost you your peace. You were delayed when rushing forward would have led to harm. Even the confusion had a purpose. It slowed you down enough to stay safe. What matters most is what didn't happen to you. You didn't become bitter. You didn't lose your values. You didn't turn cold or cruel. You went through something that could have hardened you, yet you came out with empathy, clarity, and strength. That doesn't happen by accident. That happens when someone is protected through the storm, even if they don't see the umbrella at the time. Looking back, you can see how close you were to paths that would have changed you for the worse. And the fact that you didn't end up there says everything. You were guided away, step by step, not loudly, not dramatically, but effectively. This protection didn't mean life was easy. It meant life was intentional. You were allowed to feel the pain, but not be destroyed by it. You were tested, but not abandoned. And now, standing where you are, you can finally say this with clarity. You were never alone. Every step, even the painful ones, carried you towards safety. They expected your downfall, but witnessed your rise. They truly believed you would fall. That was their expectation. When they created obstacles, spread doubt, or applied pressure, they assumed it would break you. In their mind, your confidence would disappear, your strength would fade, and your spirit would weaken. They waited for that moment, but it never came. Instead of collapsing, you stayed standing, and that alone confused them more than anything else could. What shocked them wasn't just that you survived, it was how you survived. You didn't come back angry. You didn't become harsh or cold. You didn't turn into the kind of person who hurts others to feel strong. You carried yourself with calm and self-respect. You kept your values intact. Rising with grace is rare, and it's something people never know how to handle. While they expected to see you struggle, they saw you becoming clearer. Your energy changed. Your reactions softened. You moved with intention instead of emotion. That kind of growth is unsettling to those who expected your downfall because it proves their efforts didn't work. And when someone's plan fails, they're forced to face themselves. Your rise didn't come with loud success or dramatic announcements. It showed up in your posture, your decisions, your peace. You began choosing better for yourself. You stopped chasing approval. You stopped needing validation from the same people who doubted you. That quiet confidence spoke louder than any achievement ever could. This is where karma becomes uncomfortable for them. Not because you attacked back, but because your existence became a reminder of discipline they avoided, healing they postponed, growth they resisted. Seeing you rise highlighted the gap between who they are and who they could have been. And that gap is hard to sit with. Your growth became the consequence they never planned for. They expected damage, not development. They expected weakness, not wisdom. And because you chose growth instead of revenge, the contrast became impossible to ignore. You moved forward without dragging anyone down, and that takes strength many people never build. What makes your rise powerful is that it wasn't fueled by hate or competition. It was fueled by self-respect. You didn't rise to prove them wrong. You rose because you refused to stay small. And that kind of rise can't be taken away. You learned the power of not chasing justice. There was a time when all you wanted was answers. You wanted someone to admit what they did. You wanted an apology that felt real. You wanted closure so you could finally move on in peace. Those feelings were natural. When you're hurt, your mind looks for fairness. It wants things to make sense. It wants balance right away. And for a long time, it felt heavy, carrying those unanswered questions. At some point, you realized that chasing justice was draining you more than the situation itself. Waiting for people to understand, admit, or change was keeping you tied to them. Your energy stayed stuck in the past, and that's when something shifted inside you. You began to see that real justice doesn't need your constant attention. It doesn't need arguments, explanations, or reminders. The moment you stopped chasing fairness, your life became lighter. Not because everything was suddenly fixed, but because you released control. You accepted that not everyone will take responsibility. Not every story will get a clean ending. And that acceptance gave you freedom. You stopped measuring your healing by someone else's response. When you stepped back, karma stepped in. Without effort, without force, balance started finding its way. Situations unfolded naturally. Truths surfaced. Consequences arrived in forms you couldn't have planned. That's the power of letting go. When you stop interfering, things align on their own. This taught you trust. Not blind trust, but grounded trust. Trust in timing. That things happen when they're ready, not when you demand them. Trust in balance. That life has a way of evening things out, even if it takes time. And trust in something greater than control. That not everything is meant to be handled by you. You also learned that peace doesn't come from winning arguments. It comes from choosing not to fight battles that cost too much. You didn't lose your voice. You chose when to use it. You redirected your energy toward healing, growth, and building a life that felt stable again. The biggest lesson was realizing that justice doesn't always look like punishment. Sometimes it looks like distance. Sometimes it looks like clarity. Sometimes it looks like moving forward while others stay stuck. And that's enough. By not chasing justice, you allowed it to find you. Quietly, naturally, without struggle. And in that process, you gained something far more valuable than an apology. You gained peace. This phase prepared you for something higher. This phase of your life wasn't only about watching others face the results of their actions. It was mainly about what was happening to you. Every challenge, every moment of confusion, every emotional test was shaping you for something higher. At the time, it felt heavy. You wondered why things had to be so hard. But now, looking back, you can see that none of it was wasted. You've changed in ways that matter. You see people more clearly now, not through emotion, but through understanding. You can sense intentions faster. You no longer give unlimited access to everyone. That doesn't make you cold. It makes you aware. You've learned that protecting your energy is not selfish. It's necessary. Peace has become a priority, not an afterthought. You also choose peace faster than before. Situations that once pulled you into stress no longer hold the same power. You step back instead of reacting. You think before responding. You walk away when something doesn't feel right. That calm decision-making is a sign of growth. It means you trust yourself now. The pain you went through didn't harden you. It refined you. Instead of becoming bitter, you became wiser. Instead of closing your heart, you learned balance. You kept your kindness, but added boundaries. That's not weakness, that's maturity. You didn't lose who you are. You became more grounded in it. As karma finishes its work behind you, you can feel the shift ahead. The weight you carried is lighter. The confusion is clearing. A new chapter is opening, not suddenly, but steadily. This chapter is built on clarity. You know what you want and what you won't accept. It's built on strength, the quiet kind that doesn't need approval. And it's built on self-respect, the kind that changes how others treat you. You're moving differently now. Your choices are intentional. Your focus is clearer. You're no longer pulled in every direction. You understand that not every opportunity is meant for you, and not every connection deserves your time. That awareness came from experience, not theory. This phase didn't break you. It prepared you. It taught you discernment, patience, and inner confidence. And as you step forward, you're not carrying the past. You're carrying lessons. That's how you know you're ready for what's next.